It was one of those early fall evenings where the breeze feels warm, like summer doesn't want to let go. Somewhere in the backyard, kids were chasing each other with squirt guns, someone was burning burgers, and laughter echoed off the brick walls of my aunt's house. The annual family cookout, a tradition full of cheap beer, plastic chairs, and well-rehearsed small talk. I wasn't planning to stay long. I never do. My fiancée, Nora, was by my side like always, kind of my human shield. She's the only reason I make it through these gatherings without flipping a table. Nora knows how to step in when a conversation gets too weird or when my relatives start digging for life updates. I don't feel like offering. We were nursing warm drinks near the garage when it happened. Riley walked in. My cousin Riley has this way of making an entrance like he's stepping into a photo shoot, not a family function. Sunglasses on, even though the sun was down. Shirt unbuttoned just low enough to show off a gold chain. The kind of guy who revs his engine at red lights just to feel something. He didn't even say hello. Just strolled past the poker table where a few uncles were shuffling cards and said, "Still playing for lunch money, huh?" No one answered. That's how Riley likes it. Silence gives him space to perform. He didn't sit. Not yet. He just stood there, spinning his car key around one finger like it was a trophy. Then, click, he tossed it on the center of the poker table. The sound echoed, like a challenge. "Audi's 5, he said, grinning. "Mint condition. Let's play for something real." You could feel the room shift. My Uncle Rob chuckled nervously. My younger cousin Marcus let out a low "you" like this was suddenly an episode of Fast and Furious, dysfunctional edition. No one reached for chips. Riley finally took a seat and leaned back, still smiling. Kidding, obviously. I mean, it's just family, right? Everyone laughed. Thin, awkward laughter. But I knew that look in his eye. That wasn't a joke. That was bait. I stayed quiet. I always do. I'd been holding a decent hand, 3 jacks. Not amazing, not trash. Just enough to feel like maybe the universe was nudging me. Riley started reshuffling. I looked down at the keys on the table, then at Nora. She raised one eyebrow, the tiniest nod. That was all I needed. I pulled out my car key, a beat-up Honda Civic that still rattled when I turned the AC too high, and set it next to Riley's fancy Audi key. His smile twitched. "I'm in," I said. Calm, just loud enough. Everything stopped. Riley stared at me like I'd grown horns. Marcus's jaw literally dropped. Uncle Rob cleared his throat and muttered something about things getting out of hand. Riley leaned forward, arms crossed. "You sure that old tin can of yours even belongs on the same table as mine?" I didn't blink. "You put yours down first." He let out a breath, almost a laugh. I was messing around. "Then maybe don't play with real keys." The table fell into a thick, nervous silence. That's when Nora stood up, quietly, gracefully. She walked over, slipped off her engagement bracelet, the one I got her when I proposed, and placed it on the table. Then her earrings. Then the watch her grandma gave her before she passed. No words, just intent. Riley's smirk finally cracked. "You guys are really doing this?" he asked. I didn't answer. Didn't have to. This wasn't about poker anymore. It was about something that had been building for years. The constant one-upping, the fake compliments, the way Riley made everyone else feel small just by existing louder. And I wasn't about to look away anymore. He stood up, walked outside for a bit, probably expecting us to cool down and call it off. He came back 5 minutes later with a small briefcase. No joke, a whole briefcase. He popped it open like he was unveiling treasure. Stacks of cash, fresh bands. The kind of thing you only see in crime shows or shady YouTube giveaways. 200 grand, he said casually. That's what I made flipping properties this summer. Someone behind me whispered, "Jesus." Riley looked right at me. "You folding? Or you matching?" My dad, who'd been pretending not to pay attention from the corner, stood up. "Elijah, don't be stupid. That's not the kind of money you play with." He was right. But Riley wasn't playing with money. He was playing with power. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, showed Nora. She nodded. Between our house equity, Nora's heirloom jewelry, and the savings we'd built for our wedding, we had more than enough. "Matched," I said. Riley's face froze. Just for a second. Then he laughed, too loud, like he needed to convince himself this was still a game. "Okay," he said. "Let's raise the stakes. Then he said the words that changed everything. Next round. $500,000. Everyone gasped. Even Uncle Rob sat forward like someone had pulled his spine upright. I felt my pulse in my fingertips. But I didn't flinch, because I knew what this was now. Not a game. Not a dare. A war. One Riley had started years ago, with every snide comment, every fake laugh, every time he reminded the family he was the successful one, and I was done letting him win. I didn't respond to Riley's challenge right away. I just looked at the table, then at Nora, then at Riley. That half smile was still clinging to his face, like he was trying to prove something to everyone, including himself. He leaned back in his chair like he already knew I'd back down, but I didn't. I stood up, looked him in the eye, and said, "Done." Not loud, just clear. I think that scared him more than yelling would have. Nora was already opening her phone, showing our accounts, the jewelry appraisals, the scanned copy of the title deed to the little house we were renovating. Together, it added up. A little over $500,000 if you squinted hard enough and factored in Nora's late grandmother's necklace, which we hadn't planned to part with, unless it was for a down payment or an emergency. I guess this counted. Riley's smile faltered for a second when Nora laid her phone on the table, screen up. He stared at the numbers. Real numbers. Hard-earned, honest, nothing to prove savings. That's when the mood shifted for everyone else too. This wasn't showmanship anymore. It was real, uncomfortable. Like the whole garage realized we'd crossed some line nobody ever expected us to. Aunt Liza whispered something under her breath. Marcus looked like he'd just watched someone jump out of a moving car. Even Uncle Rob, who usually loved this kind of family drama, had gone quiet. Riley didn't say anything at first. He just reached over and snapped his briefcase shut. Then he cracked his knuckles like a guy about to arm wrestle a bear. "All right," he said. "One last round. Winner takes all. No limits. I swear you could have heard a mosquito sneeze in that silence. No one moved. No one even breathed wrong. The stakes were so far past rational it felt like we were all underwater. But I didn't hesitate, because Riley wasn't just trying to win a poker hand. He was trying to erase me. Again. And I wasn't going to let him. I sat down, picked up my cards, and felt the familiar buzz in my chest that only shows up when you're either about to do something brave or something stupid. Or maybe both. The cards weren't anything special, but they didn't need to be. Because Riley didn't know one thing. People were watching now. Really watching. Not just the poker hand, but the years of passive-aggressive jabs. The subtle digs, the fake compliments. And maybe, for the first time, they were starting to see him clearly. The guy who never stopped performing. The guy who'd turned every birthday, wedding, and funeral into his own stage. My dad stepped forward and spoke, not to Riley, but to me. "Son, are you sure?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm done playing small." That's when something unexpected happened. Lisa, my cousin who'd always been the quiet one, the one Riley constantly brushed off like lint, stood up. She walked over, reached into her purse, and pulled out a folder. "Last year," she said, loud enough for the room to hear, "I asked Riley for a short-term loan when Mom was in the hospital. He laughed and told me to figure it out like an adult." She placed the folder on the table. "My condo, fully paid off. You've got my piece of the pot." Riley scoffed, tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. Lisa sat down again, like that was all she needed to say. Then, one by one, people started moving. Uncle Tony laid down a certificate, his pickup truck title. Aunt Liza handed over an envelope with the balance of her savings account. Marcus brought over a lockbox he'd inherited from his grandfather. A quiet storm, slow and relentless. Everyone Riley had slighted, dismissed, ignored, now lining up behind me. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about someone finally saying enough. The final total? A little over $700,000 in assets. It was ridiculous. And also kind of perfect. Riley sat back, blinking like he'd been slapped across 3 different timelines. His fiancée, Sydney, who had barely looked up from her phone all evening, suddenly stood. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped at Riley. "You're really doing this?" Riley opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Sydney turned to me. "You think this proves something? That you're better than him?" I didn't blink. "No, it just proves he's not better than everyone else." Her eyes narrowed. "This is pathetic." "Then don't play," I said simply. But she didn't leave. She just stood behind Riley. Silent now, arms crossed. And when Riley looked at her, I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Doubt. Real, bone-deep doubt. He glanced around the garage like someone just turned on all the lights in a haunted house. No shadows left to hide in. "You all hate me now?" he asked. Nobody answered. That was answer enough. Riley picked up his cards like they were heavier than they should be. Hands, trembling. He stared at them too long. I watched his throat move as he swallowed. "Let's finish this," he muttered. I nodded and leaned forward. Time to deal. The next few minutes passed in this strange, hushed rhythm. Shuffling, betting, matching, raising, eyes flicking back and forth between hands. Riley went all in before the final card. So did I. No theatrics. No speeches. Just cards and breath and tension. When the last card hit the table, we both stared at it for a long second. Riley was the first to flip his hand. Full house. Queens over tens. The room gasped. Solid hand. Scary hand. But then I laid mine down. Slowly, deliberately. A straight flush. King high. And just like that, the air collapsed. Sydney's hand flew to her mouth. My dad muttered, "Holy hell." Lisa clapped once. A single sharp sound. Riley didn't speak. Didn't blink. His hand hovered above the table, not reaching for anything. Just. Suspended. The reality sank in slow. Not just that he lost, but what it meant, what it said. And for once, he didn't have a comeback. Didn't have a clever line. He just sat there, quiet, still. The king without a crown. I stood up, not to gloat, just to breathe. And when I looked at Nora, she was already smiling, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment since the day she met Riley. The room didn't explode into applause. It just exhaled, like a pressure valve, finally released. Someone turned the music back on. Someone else popped open a beer. But Riley? He didn't move. And neither did his briefcase. Riley didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the table like he was still trying to convince himself this wasn't happening. Like maybe if he stared long enough, the cards would change, or the rules would reset. But nothing moved except the air, and even that felt stiff. I could feel everyone watching him, waiting for some kind of reaction, but there was none. No smug joke, no sarcastic line, just silence. The kind that drips into your bones. And then, finally, he blinked. Not fast, not frantic. Just slow, like someone waking up from a bad dream they couldn't shake. He looked at his hand again, then at mine, and I saw the moment his posture cracked. A tiny sag in the shoulders, a shift in his jaw, a breath he didn't mean to let out. That was when Sydney stepped forward. Voice low and sharp. "Tell me this was just a bluff," she said. "Tell me you didn't really put everything on the table." Riley didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. That silence, it was everything. Sydney stared at him, lips parted like she was waiting for him to say something, anything that might explain why he just risked their future for the sake of ego. But nothing came, not even a whisper. She turned to me, furious now. "You think this is noble? You think ruining him proves some point?" I didn't flinch. I didn't ruin him. He bet, and he lost. "You can't play the game and cry about the rules when they apply to you." Her eyes narrowed. "You were supposed to be the quiet one." "I was," I said. "But quiet doesn't mean blind." That hit harder than I meant it to, but I didn't take it back. Because it was the truth, and the truth had been chasing Riley a lot longer than I had. My uncle, Riley's dad, finally spoke from the edge of the room. His voice sounded tired, not just from the game, but from everything, from years of excuses and enabling. "Riley," he said, "I don't even know what to say to you." Riley lifted his head slowly, like it took effort just to meet his father's eyes. "I didn't think they'd actually match me," he muttered. "You thought money would scare us off," I replied. "But it turns out people remember how you made them feel, even when the cash is gone." Something cracked in his expression, something real. Maybe shame, maybe regret, maybe just the sudden realization that the power he always thought he had was never really his. It was borrowed, propped up by silence, by people too polite to call him out, by a family too fragmented to fight back, until tonight. Nora stepped beside me then, resting her hand on my arm, and for a second, I almost forgot where we were. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her presence alone felt like an answer to every time Riley had tried to make me feel small. Sydney finally backed away from the table, muttering something I didn't catch, and grabbed her purse. "I'm not staying for this," she said. "You can find your own way home." And just like that, she walked out. No drama, no goodbye, just gone. Riley didn't stop her. He didn't even move. His hands stayed flat on the table, fingers twitching slightly, like he was trying to undo something with muscle memory. My dad walked over, slow and deliberate, then looked at me and said, "I didn't expect this, but I'm proud of you." I didn't know what to say. Coming from him, those words carried weight. He's never been the sentimental type. Never been the "I'm proud of you" type either. But tonight was different. Everything was. People began to move again. The frozen moment was melting. Someone turned off the poker app. Someone else picked up an empty cup. The garage felt less like a battleground now and more like the aftermath of a storm, quiet, eerie, but peaceful in a way. Uncle Rob walked over to Riley and looked at him the way you look at someone you used to recognize. "You let your pride swallow everything," he said, voice almost kind. "And for what? Bragging rights?" Riley looked up at him, and for the first time in my life, I saw tears in his eyes. Not crocodile tears, not for show. Just that wide, stunned look of someone realizing too late what they'd lost. "I thought if I didn't win, I'd be nothing," he whispered. "Winning didn't make you anything," I said. "Respect does. And you burned that a long time ago." A couple of cousins nodded, even the ones who used to laugh at his jokes. Lisa walked past him without a glance, picked up her folder from the table and handed it to me. "Use my share however you want," she said. "Just make sure he doesn't touch it." Then she left. No parting words, no gloating, just dignity. Nora and I stood there, hands still lightly touching, watching Riley's world shrink in real time. He looked around the garage as if searching for something, maybe sympathy, maybe forgiveness. He found neither. My uncle sighed and stepped forward. "You're going to have to fix this yourself, son, and not with another bet." Riley finally pushed back his chair and stood. Not like before, not like the cocky entrance he made earlier. He moved like someone whose legs were carrying more weight than they were built for. He looked at me one last time and said, "You won." "It wasn't about that," I replied. "It was about stopping the bleeding." Then he walked out the door, alone. No speech, no slam, just the sound of his shoes on concrete. A kind of hollow echo I'll never forget. The garage stayed quiet a beat longer. Then someone chuckled awkwardly, like breaking the tension was mandatory. And then the voices returned. Not loud, not fake, just human. My aunt pulled out a fresh deck of cards, joking that maybe we should go back to playing for pretzels. Marcus offered to order pizza. Uncle Rob started telling some story about a high school prank, and, for once, no one interrupted him. The mood didn't snap back to normal, but it did shift. Something had cleared. Like a fog we didn't know we'd been breathing in for years had finally lifted. Nora leaned in close and said, "You all right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, just processing." She smiled and gave my hand a quick squeeze. "You didn't just win a hand, you reset the board." I exhaled and looked around the room. People were laughing now, talking like they hadn't in years. Not performing, not guarding, just existing. I couldn't remember the last time the reunion actually felt like family. And even though Riley was gone, his absence felt like the missing piece we didn't know we needed. Not because we wanted to cut him out, but because for the first time, no one had to shrink around him. The next morning started too quiet, like the silence was trying to tiptoe around what had happened the night before. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen blinds like it was trying not to wake anyone. And for a few minutes, I sat at the table alone, staring into a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Nora was still asleep, curled up in the guest room like she hadn't carried the emotional weight of last night across the finish line with me. And I figured she deserved at least another hour of peace before the ripple effects started hitting. Because I knew they would. Something like that doesn't just stay in the garage. Family drama travels fast. I was half right. By the time noon rolled around, people had started clearing out, some with polite excuses about traffic, others avoiding eye contact altogether. The ones who stayed looked at me differently. Not in a bad way, just adjusted. Like they were relearning who I was without the lens Riley always cast over me. My dad clapped a hand on my shoulder at one point and said, "You held your ground," which, coming from a man who once told me to pick my battles, by pretending they weren't happening was basically a standing ovation. Even Uncle Rob, who thrived on chaos but usually avoided accountability like a sport, pulled me aside and said, "I should have said something years ago. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew." For a long time, Riley had been the family's noise, and the rest of us had adjusted our volume accordingly. Now, with that background static gone, you could finally hear what people had been thinking all along. Lisa and Marcus stayed behind to help clean up, and while we were stacking chairs and boxing leftover burgers, Lisa asked, "Do you think he'll ever come back from this?" I thought about it for a second before answering. He might, but it won't be the same version of him. And honestly, I don't think that version was working for anyone, not even him. Marcus nodded slowly, like that settled something inside him. It's weird. I used to look up to him, thought he had it all figured out. He wanted everyone to think that, I said, even if it meant stepping on people to prove it, Lisa muttered. And we just let him. I didn't respond because she wasn't wrong. It hadn't been one person's fault. It had been a culture, a pattern. Every laugh at his mean jokes, every compliment we gave to keep the peace, every eye roll we swallowed instead of saying, "Hey, that's not okay." But last night was the reset, and it was long overdue. Later that afternoon, Nora and I sat on the back porch, watching kids run around the yard like nothing had happened. And maybe for them, nothing had. They didn't know about pride and ego and inherited expectations. They just wanted more lemonade and a chance to climb the tire swing. I envied that. Nora sipped her drink and asked, "What are you thinking about?" I tilted my head toward the garage. How fast something can fall apart when it was never built on anything solid. She nodded. Or how quickly people show you who they are when the show ends. We were quiet for a bit after that, letting the breeze do the talking. And then she said something I hadn't expected. "You know, I used to worry about marrying into your family." I turned to her. "Really?" "Not because of you," she said quickly, "but because I wasn't sure there was room for someone like me in a place where people like Riley called the shots." That hit harder than I wanted to admit, because she was right. There hadn't been room. Not for her, not for me, not for anyone who didn't play the game by Riley's rules. But last night cracked something open, and I didn't plan on letting it close back up. "There's room now," I said, "because we made it." She smiled at that. Not big, but deep. Like something inside her unclenched. We stayed out there until the sun started shifting toward the trees, and then I got a message. It was from Riley. One line. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I stared at the screen for a long moment before locking the phone and setting it face down. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted revenge, but because not everything deserves a reply. Sometimes silence isn't a punishment, it's a boundary. Over the next few weeks, things shifted in subtle ways. Group texts were a little quieter without Riley flooding them with humble brags. Birthdays were more relaxed. People started visiting each other more often. The gatherings didn't feel like events to endure anymore, but actual chances to connect. When Lisa's mom got sick again, people showed up to help without needing a reason. When Marcus needed help moving, no one made a joke about trucks and masculinity. They just showed up with boxes. The family didn't become perfect. No family does. But the tone had changed. We'd stopped tiptoeing around one person's ego and started leaning into each other instead. A few people tried reaching out to Riley. I heard about it through the grapevine. One cousin said he refused to come to Thanksgiving. Another mentioned he'd unfollowed half the family on social media. Sydney had moved out apparently. Took the dog and the espresso machine. No one blamed her. Riley's spiral wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A slow unraveling of the illusion he'd curated for years. And the truth is, I didn't hate him. I didn't even want to see him crash. I just didn't want to be one of the people handing him fuel while he lit matches. The strangest part was how normal everything felt once he was gone. Like he'd been the storm cloud we'd all gotten used to pretending wasn't there. Without him dominating the space, everyone else had room to breathe, to be. I saw Marcus laughing with my dad, something I'd never seen before. Lisa started planning a family trip, something we hadn't done in over a decade. Even Uncle Rob started showing up to dinners without needing someone to drag him out. Nora and I got back into our wedding planning with fresh energy. There was a lightness to it now. No more worrying about speeches being hijacked or who was going to try and make our day about them. Just love, food, and the people who had earned their seat at the table. When we finally picked a date, Lisa offered to coordinate. Marcus volunteered his band. My dad, who hadn't spoken much about the wedding before, insisted on covering the catering as his gift. It was like everyone was trying to build something new, together. And for once, no one was asking permission to do it. The months leading up to the wedding passed in this odd kind of peace. Not the kind where everything is perfect, but the kind that settles into the spaces where chaos used to live. The family felt different, not in the way that movies paint after a dramatic fallout with soaring music and a group hug, but in smaller, quieter ways people followed through on what they said they'd do. No one dominated conversations. And somehow it started to feel like we were growing towards something instead of always trying to defend against someone. Nora and I spent a few weekends visiting the venue, a renovated farmhouse with ivy climbing up its stone walls and wildflowers growing like they'd been waiting for someone to notice them. Every time we went, it felt more like home, not because of the place itself, but because of what we were bringing to it. Our vision, our people, our peace. And maybe that's why, one afternoon, while we were walking through the main hall with Nora's sister and the florist, I caught myself thinking about Riley. Not out of guilt, just curiosity what he would have done if he'd been here, how he would have tried to spin the focus. I didn't miss the drama, but I did wonder if he ever realized how much effort it took to carry a spotlight that never actually belonged to him. Nora noticed my silence and just gave my hand a squeeze. She never pressed. She didn't have to. That's the thing about someone who's been in your corner before you ever stepped into the ring. They don't need every detail, just the truth. And the truth was, I didn't regret anything. The family didn't ask much about Riley anymore, maybe because they already knew there wasn't much left to say. Lisa told me he'd been seen at a bar downtown once, alone, talking to a bartender about a business deal that never happened. Marcus heard he was living in a condo that used to belong to one of his clients. No one confirmed anything. No one needed to. He had built his empire on perception, and once that collapsed, so did his invitations. Our wedding day arrived like a calm breeze after a storm that had raged for years. The morning was cool, sky painted in soft blues and golds, the kind of weather that felt earned. Nora looked like something you only get to see once in a lifetime, not because of the dress, although she was stunning, but because of the way she carried herself, like someone who had never let fear shrink her voice. I stood in the back of the venue, surrounded by people I trusted, watching them laugh, sip mimosas, and take selfies like they weren't just guests but architects of something better. Lisa was running logistics like a general, snapping orders into her phone and her clipboard like the universe depended on it. Marcus had set up a small stage for the reception and was tuning his guitar while chewing on the same straw he always used when he was nervous. My dad stood next to me, straightening his tie, pretending like he wasn't emotional, even though his eyes were pink at the corners. "You good?" he asked. And I nodded, but he didn't let it drop there. "I know we haven't always said things when we should have. I missed chances. I see that now. But I'm proud of the man you became, and I'm glad I got to see it with my own eyes." I didn't try to make a speech. I just said, "Thanks, Dad," and gave him a nod, which somehow said more than any toast ever could. The ceremony itself was simple, real. No theatrics, no viral moments. Just vows we wrote ourselves, and the people who mattered standing close enough to hear them. Nora's words made me forget to breathe for a second. She spoke about home not being a place, but a person. About silence being power when used right. About building a future on something no one could take away. When it was my turn, I spoke less like a groom and more like someone who had finally figured out what strength really was: not loud, not showy, not measured in money or control, but in stillness, in loyalty, in the quiet choice to protect something instead of prove it. After the applause, after the rings, after the kiss, we stepped into the kind of warmth I didn't know I'd ever feel in front of family. People weren't just celebrating, they were relieved, like they'd needed this just as much as we had. The reception was held under string lights and oak trees, laughter floating like it belonged in the leaves. Lisa gave a speech that made half the crowd cry and the other half laugh so hard they spilled their drinks. Marcus played a song he wrote just for us, a soft, raw melody that sounded like a confession. Even my dad danced once, awkwardly but sincerely, with Nora's mother while mouthing the words to some 80s hit like it was part of a peace treaty. No one brought up Riley, not even once. But his absence wasn't awkward. It was clean, like a healed scar you stop noticing until someone points it out. And then, toward the end of the night, as people started drifting toward dessert tables and folding chairs, Lisa found me near the fire pit. She handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. She just smiled. "A gift. From all of us. For what you did." I opened it slowly. Inside was a deed transfer. Lisa had legally added me as a co-owner of a property she inherited last year. "Why would you do this?" I asked. "Because you reminded us what it looks like when someone stands their ground," she said. "You didn't just win a hand, Elijah. You changed the rules." I didn't know what to say. Gratitude sat in my throat like a warm stone. Nora came over then, wrapped her arms around me from behind, and whispered, "Still think poker's just a game?" I laughed, soft and low, and said, "No, I think it was a mirror." Because that's what it had been, really. A reflection of how far we'd let things slide, of how we'd adjusted our spines around one man's ego for too long, and of what could happen when anyone finally said no more. The rest of the evening blurred into snapshots. My dad singing badly, Lisa twirling her little niece, Marcus making s'mores like a gourmet chef, Nora kicking off her shoes and dancing barefoot under the stars, and me watching it all, realizing this wasn't just a celebration of love, it was a reclamation of space, of voice, of family, of legacy. The version of us that let Riley rule with charm and condescension was gone. In its place stood something better, not polished, not perfect, but undeniably real. And as the fire crackled and stories poured out around it, I leaned into Nora, kissed her temple, and whispered, "We did it." She smiled and said, "No, you did, but I knew better." This kind of change doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone who stopped clapping for the wrong people, who stopped shrinking, who chose quiet courage over loud approval. And maybe that's the real win. A few months passed after the wedding, long enough for everything to settle, but not long enough to forget. Life moved forward, quietly, without announcement. That was the first sign. Things had truly changed. No one was waiting for drama anymore. People checked in because they wanted to, not because they felt obligated. There were no power plays, no silent rankings based on jobs, cars, or bank statements. It was like the family had exhaled and finally meant it. Nora and I built a rhythm: slow mornings with burnt toast, quiet evenings planning our next home project, weekends helping Marcus with his band, or grabbing coffee with Lisa. The world didn't suddenly glow with perfection, but the noise was gone, and that made room for something better. Peace, not performance. Connection, not comparison. Every now and then, someone would bring up Riley, not with bitterness, just curiosity, like wondering what happened to a neighbor who moved away and never left a forwarding address. I didn't know exactly where he'd gone, only that he hadn't come back. No texts, no calls. His name hadn't come up in any group chats, not even from his closest cousins. It was like the whole family had instinctively decided to leave the door unlocked, but not swing it wide open. Then, one Sunday afternoon, Nora and I were at the farmer's market when I saw him, Riley, standing by the honey stall, alone, holding a bag of apples like he didn't quite know what to do with them. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but something in his posture, the way his shoulders curved in instead of out. He hadn't seen me yet, and for a moment I just stood there, frozen between instinct and curiosity. Part of me wanted to turn and leave, pretend it never happened. Another part of me, the one that had spent years letting him win without saying a word, just watched. Eventually he looked up, our eyes met. No dramatic music, no crowd parting, just a stillness that settled over us like a shared breath. He nodded first. I nodded back. Then, to my own surprise, I walked over. We didn't shake hands, didn't exchange pleasantries. He just said, "Hey." I said hey back. For a few seconds we just stood there, two people who used to orbit the same fire, now standing on cooler ground. Riley looked away, then back again. "You look good," he said. "Thanks," I replied. "You too." He half smiled at that, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I saw pictures from the wedding. Looked nice." "It was," I said. "Simple, real." He nodded again, like he understood what that meant without needing more explanation. Then he cleared his throat. I know I can't undo what happened, but I've been thinking about it, about everything. And I guess, I get it now, why people were done, why you stood up. I didn't interrupt. He continued, I thought being the loudest meant I mattered, that if I kept winning, no one would look too closely at how hollow it all felt. But you saw through that, and honestly, I hated you for it, because you didn't play the game, and I didn't know how to exist without it. He let out a shaky laugh, the kind you let out when the truth stings. I stayed quiet, not out of spite, just to let the air breathe around his words. He looked down at the apples in his hand like they might offer a better script. I'm not asking for a reset, he said. Just, maybe down the line, if you ever think there's space for a conversation that isn't about poker or pride, I'd be willing to have it. I didn't promise anything, but I didn't walk away either. I said, that kind of space doesn't come from one apology. It comes from doing things differently. Riley nodded again, slower this time. I know, and I'm trying. There was something fragile about him now, not weak, just stripped of armor. And maybe that's what he needed more than anything. Not punishment, not exile, just a moment of being seen without the mask. We didn't hug. We didn't swap numbers. He just said goodbye. And I watched him walk away with the apples still clutched in one hand like he wasn't ready to let go yet, but knew he couldn't carry everything. I didn't tell the family I saw him, not because I was hiding it, but because it wasn't their moment. It was mine, and maybe his. A quiet step towards something that may never be whole, but didn't have to be bitter. That night, as Nora and I sat on the couch flipping through house paint samples, she glanced over and asked, "You okay?" I nodded. Ran into Riley today. She didn't react, just waited. I told her what happened, every word, every pause, and when I finished, she leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Sounds like maybe the cycle finally broke." I thought about that. The years of silence, of people swallowing hurt just to keep the peace. The way Riley had become a symbol of everything no one ever said out loud. And how, when someone finally did, the whole foundation shifted. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it just changed shape. She looked at me. Is that enough? I didn't have to think long. Yeah, it is. Because the truth is, some people spend their whole lives waiting for apologies that never come, or for others to change in ways they never will. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I had built something better with Nora, with the family that stayed, with the version of myself I used to think had to be quiet to survive. Now I knew better. Power isn't in volume. It's in intention, in presence, in choosing what stays and what goes. A week later, Lisa texted me a photo from her front porch, Marcus playing guitar, my dad grilling, Nora laughing with Aunt Liza, all of them in frame, no filters, no pretending. She wrote, "Feels like family again." I saved it to my phone, not because I needed proof, but because some moments deserve to be kept exactly as they are. Honest, untouched, true. And as I looked at that picture, I realized the real win wasn't the night I beat Riley at poker. It was everything that came after, the rebuilding, the rebalancing, the reclaiming of a legacy that finally had room for all of us. No bets, no bluffs, just real hands, finally open. Story 2. My brother grinned and added, "Thanks for the money, but nobody wants a janitor in the wedding photos." I gave a nod. I canceled the catering I had paid for when I got home. After that, I packed my bags, went on vacation, and laughed. After a day, my phone exploded. My brother shouted it clearly and loudly while I was still standing in the reception tent's corner. He smiled as if it were the last line of a joke he had been wanting to tell all night. Lifting his glass of champagne at me, Aiden Allen yelled, I really appreciate you taking care of the meals and everything, dude. A true hero's move. People look in my direction." I grinned, uncomfortable. He continued, however, stopping for dramatic effect. "Let's be truthful. A janitor in the wedding pictures is something no one wants. Quiet, then clumsy laughs." His best friend laughed. Emma, his bride, covered her face with her wine glass. A couple of relatives examined their footwear. Alan's colleague turned away after giving me a pathetic look. I simply stood there wearing my blue uniform shirt and work boots. "My sleeves still have the little smell of bleach on them," I chuckled. "Only once. A little exhalation via the nose." "You're correct," I said after that. That was all. No drink was thrown by me. I didn't shout. Unlike in a movie, I didn't just barge out. As if nothing had occurred, I just turned back, grinned at my younger brother, and strolled off the lawn and into the parking lot. But inside, something within separated neatly and silently, the manner that a deep cut is not felt until the blood is seen. I spent a lot of time sitting in my car and watching people dance through the windows of the reception hall. In contrast to the fairy lights, they seemed like shadows. I took out my phone and accessed the catering confirmation that I had paid for some weeks prior, $93.24.77. If canceled within 24 hours, there is no reimbursement. I arrived barely in time. After selecting cancel, I purchased a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. A janitor in the wedding pictures is something no one wants. All right, let's see how people react to pictures of weddings without food on the tables. I appreciate the money. However, nobody wants to see a janitor in the wedding pictures. It wasn't merely a painful sentence. Everything I hadn't been able to notice for the past 8 years was exploded. Allow me to explain. My younger brother is Alan. The lovely one was always the enjoyable one. The child who got by with a skewed smile and justifications like I'm working it out while others cleaned up the pieces. Usually me. I never attended college. Alan was changing majors like socks, so I cleaned them. To assist mom and dad with paying our tuition, I was dragging a mop around the corridors of the dorms. He left after 3 semesters. I don't want to go to college, he added. However, thank you, my friend. You're saving lives. That was his go-to line. When he and Emma moved in together, I assisted him in obtaining his first apartment, paid his past due utilities, and covered the deposit. He remarked, "You're the only one I trust with the wedding aid," after they became engaged. "Can you assist us in making it happen?" I would answer yes, he knew. I did the impossible because I always did. I gave up my single vacation in years, took on extra, and skipped weekends. I spent every spare penny on the wedding. I covered the cost of the catering. When Emma's mother forgot her checkbook, I assisted her with the venue deposit. Because the first garment made Emma fat, I even paid for the additional expense of her second dress. I grinned. When they shared a kiss, I applauded. What did I receive? I appreciate the money. However, nobody wants to see a janitor in the wedding pictures. That smirk, that phrase. He seemed proud of himself based on the glint in his eye, as if it were a mic drop. I woke up the following morning in my low-cost hotel room, the windows open to let in the sea air and California breeze. It ought to have been a sense of relief. Rather, I felt a knot of anger in my stomach. I went through my phone's contents. 47 calls were not returned. By 6 p.m., the messages had begun. Emma, where are you, Aiden? Alan, did you call off the meal, dude? Tell me this is a misunderstanding, please, Mom. Do you realize how embarrassed we were, Emma? Early departures were made. Dad, Aiden, give me a call immediately. The icing on the cake. Alan, you went too far, bro. Nobody wants to see a janitor in the wedding pictures, as I mentioned. However, this is pitiful. I spent a lot of time looking at that message. Not even an apology? No, it wasn't my intention. Just more teasing. My phone called once more that evening. I left it on voicemail, Mom. Then she phoned once more, though, and once more. I finally picked Aiden up. She said, "What's the matter with you?" "Hello, Mother. It's nice to hear from you as well." Emma's relatives are incensed. Everyone went home hungry after they spent all that money. Emma's relatives? I gave a sour laugh. You're referring to those who didn't spend any money and let me pay for the cake. The point isn't that. No, I responded bluntly. Your son is the point. You all laughed when your other kid made fun of me in front of everyone. Come on, please. She lost her temper. It was a joke. I fell silent. Do you truly find it amusing? I inquired. Do you find it amusing? I paid for Alan's wedding, canceled vacations, and declined increases in order to stay in town and assist you with the mortgage, only to be informed I wasn't photo-worthy. At that moment, the line went silent. Indeed, Aiden, you do wear that uniform everywhere. Perhaps if you put forth more effort. That was it. That was the time. The click. I ended the call. Dad called a few hours later. What were you contemplating? He lost his temper. People were phoning us. Nothing to eat was available. Emma sobbed in the restroom. I kept silent. Son, are you listening? Dad? Calmly, I said. May I ask you a question? What? Who covered Alan's last tuition after he left school? Did you? I'm irritated, he said. However, He didn't require a new transmission at that time because his automobile broke down. Who assisted him in purchasing a secondhand one? You did. 3 winters ago, when the heating was going to be turned off, you and your mother were behind on the home. A pause occurred. Then he gave a groan. What are you trying to say? Slowly, the first stated my point. I have never failed to show up. Not once. Has anyone expressed gratitude to me without a subsequent guilt trip? You all now act as though I owe you my humiliation and my silence. You're exaggerating. No, Father. I am being finished. I didn't stop by Alan's house to make amends later that week. Not even to quarrel. All I wanted to do was deliver the receipts. Without a shirt, he opened the door. I'm holding a beer. He scratched his head and said, "Oh." The ghost reappears. I gave him a folder made of manila. What is this? All the receipts for the wedding, I said. Catering, rentals, deposits, tips. You and Emma might want to actually pay people this time. He snorted, trying to prove you're the hero again. I just stared at him. You think you're better than me? He said. But all you do is mop floors and hold grudges. No, I said. I think I've been a fool. A janitor who believed love could be bought. Who thought family meant something. Alan smirked. Guess you finally figured it out. I gave a nod. Yeah, and I hope you enjoy living with the consequences. 3 days after the wedding. Quiet. No calls, no texts, no apology. Just complete, cold nothingness. Then, a letter arrived. White envelope, my name and delicate handwriting. Inside was a typed message from Emma. Dear Aiden, we hope you understand what your actions cost us. My parents were humiliated. Alan is heartbroken. We're asking you to do the right thing and reimburse the expenses we had to cover after the catering cancellation. Enclosed is an invoice. We expect a transfer by Friday. Family means duty. The invoice. $2,400 for emergency pizza delivery. An additional generator. And my fave emotional anguish, $500 for her tears. I gazed at the letter, then casually fed it through my blender. Let the confetti pour. The next morning, Mom texted Mom. Family supper Saturday. You're coming. We need to discuss. At first, I wasn't going to go, but then I thought, nah, forget that. I will go and I'll bring everything. Saturday night, 6 p.m., I strolled in with a rucksack over my shoulder, inside my laptop and a USB. My parents were shamed. Alan is heartbroken. We kindly request that you compensate us for the costs we incurred following the cancellation of the catering. An invoice is enclosed. A move is anticipated by Friday. Family entails accountability. The bill, $2,400 for an additional generator and emergency pizza delivery. And the emotional discomfort I like best, $500 for her tears. I carefully put the letter through my blender after staring at it. Allow the confetti to fall. The next morning, Mom texted Mom. Saturday night family supper, you will arrive, we must speak. I wasn't planning to go at first, but then I changed my mind. I'll bring everything, and I'll go. I arrived at 6 p.m. on Saturday with a bag slung over my shoulder, a USB stick with screenshots, receipts, and a video I had been recording. They were all seated already. Mom was holding tissues as if she were about to cry. Arms crossed, stern face, remarked Dad. Alan dressed up like he was delivering a TED lecture, and Emma simultaneously looked wounded and arrogant. Assured, called Aiden. Mom said quietly, "Thank you for coming, don't be." I answered. "It will not take long." Emma bent over. "All of us are working to get over this. But you made us seem foolish, do you get that? Our day was destroyed by you." I extended my hand. "It's your time now. It's mine now." After setting my laptop down on the table, I turned it on. "What is this?" Dad inquired, already wary. "Evidence." I select a video from the rehearsal dinner and press play. While testing her camera, my buddy, a photographer, unintentionally took this picture. The microphone was turned on. Emma and her dad were standing with Alan, Emma's mother. "So the catering is being paid for by your brother?" Alan chuckles. "Yes." The poor fellow believes it gives him a sense of belonging. Emma gave him permission. He can only ever be a part of something respectable in this way. Alan, do not be concerned. Cleaning up after others is nothing new to him. Literally. I put the video on hold. There was utter silence in the room, still amusing. I inquired. No one responded. Mom appeared to be trying to vanish. Dad's face became white. Emma hurried to her feet. That isn't contextualized, is it? Alan's text conversations to a buddy were screenshotted when I opened another folder. Alan, the catering is being covered by Aiden. Told him we had no money. The DJ is being covered by Emma's parents, but we're keeping the rest for ourselves. Free meals, please. I give Alan my whole attention. You took advantage of me, lied to me, and then made fun of me. Now he stood too. This family was deceived by you? No, I said. At last, I stopped pretending to be the fool who banged his fist against the table. You are behaving like a kid. I looked over at him. Be calm, concentrated. No, I'm finally behaving like a man who isn't your fallback option. Emma's voice came out sharply. Our wedding was ruined by you. No, I said. I restored my respect to myself. Before I left, I grabbed my backpack. I stopped at the entrance. By the way, I forwarded the video to all of the attendees at your wedding, including Alan, your boss. He tensed. Do you recall how you made fun of janitors for being beneath you? Let's see how the HR division handles that. Emma let out a gasp. You didn't. Yes, I did. After that, I left, not out of rage, in liberty, behind me. For the first time in years, I felt nothing at all when I heard Emma start crying. The family disintegrates, and a surprising newcomer enters the picture. After leaving that dinner, I didn't take a car home. For the first time in my life, I pulled up to the shore, parked, sat on the hood, and simply gazed out at the ocean. The only person I felt accountable to was myself. I had nothing to offer the waves. They simply were. I could have remained there indefinitely until the phone exploded. There were 27 missed calls. There were 9 voicemails. Emma's mother called me a classless disgrace in a text message. Dad's one. You have caused us irreparable embarrassment. The real kicker, though, I think you're dead, Alan. This is something you'll regret. I read it 3 times. Grinning, I erased it. Don't be angry. Only relief. What I didn't expect was the public reaction. Apparently someone at the wedding caught the tail end of my speech on video, uploaded it to TikTok. The audio of me saying, I gave myself back my dignity, was already trending by day 3. This is the most satisfying real-life moment I've ever seen. Dude's a janitor, but just mopped the whole family. Even BuzzFeed DM'd me asking for the full story. I ignored it all. I didn't need validation, but wow, it felt good. On Thursday, it got quiet, and that's when Sophie texted me. Sophie? My ex. We dated for 2 years back when I was still trying to earn my family's approval. She left because she couldn't watch me get walked over anymore. Sophie, I saw the video. I've never been prouder of you. I always knew there was fire in you. That just buried it. We met for coffee 2 days later. No expectations, no awkward tension. Just 2 people who had endured the same storm and eventually stepped into the sun. I left because I couldn't bear how they treated you, she remarked gently, swirling her drink. I kept hoping you'd see it for yourself. I saw, I said finally. She grinned. So now what? I don't know, I said, but for the first time it'll be my decision. Back home, things were burning. Emma left. 3 days after the video went viral, Alan abandoned him. Her parents reportedly warned her that she was a shame to their family. Alan sent me a 2-word note. You prevail. I didn't respond. Then the unexpected surprise arrived. My cousin Kelly got in touch. Kelly, I've also finished them. I was inspired by you. The lease for my own apartment was just signed. At family get-together, she had always been the reserved one. Never stops observing. As it happens, she was observing everything. My mother arrived at my flat on Sunday. I refused to allow her in. All I want to do is chat. Through the screen door, she spoke. Talk then. Her voice faltered. Aiden, you destroyed the family. No, long before I stopped trying to mend the family, I said that it was broken. She was about to argue but refrained. Rather, she muttered. Your dad isn't talking to anybody. Alan is still at home. No longer my burden. You made that plain, I said. Really, you won't assist us? She inquired. Not right now? No. Her gaze. I don't even recognize you, really. At last, I grinned and closed the door. I checked my email the next day. Sophie had left a message. In 3 weeks, I'll be heading to Costa Rica. You claimed to have always wanted to travel. Do you still wish to? Before tightening, I gazed at the screen. Reserved. 2 days later, I set off on a quick journey. Not Costa Rica first. Just a peaceful weekend by myself. the evening before my departure. I was drinking whiskey while standing on my balcony. My social media was still inundated with messages. Individuals narrating their personal experiences. Thank you for expressing what they were unable to. My intention was not to set an example. I just got up 9:12 p.m. The former closest buddy of Brian Allen sent another note. I'm proud of you, dude. You were always treated like garbage by him. You got out clear even though you destroyed everything. I grinned. It was finally over, not because of the adulation. I spoke to the sky as I peered out over the city lights. I appreciate the wedding pictures. I raised a drink to the night after that, heir to liberty, the reality of saying no at last. For you to feel the warmth at last, some bridges must burn. After 2 months, Costa Rican evening, warm. As I laid in a hammock with a book I hadn't read in years, the ocean wind caressed my skin. It had a salty mango tree scent. There are no ringing phones. No guilt like a noose around my neck. I had freedom. But you know what caught me off guard the most? They weren't missed by me. Not by any means. Growing up in a home like mine teaches you to feel a certain way. Above everything, duty. They inform you. Family is the most important thing. Blood is something you don't ignore. The elder one is you. It's your responsibility. However, they never discuss respect. Mutual effort was never addressed. Never acknowledged that unrestrained love is only control. Wearing a card with their hallmarks. For years, I believed I was doing the right thing. Mending and pain. Bending, shrinking. For what purpose? To be assigned to my brother's wedding as the janitor. To be asked to pay for dessert after being removed from pictures? No, not anymore. It went viral a week after the wedding. Strangers sent me texts. People said that I motivated them and that I was bold. That they eventually distanced themselves from their own poisonous parents, siblings, and even partners. One message was particularly clear. I was once called useless by my brother. I was taking care of my niece and paying his rent. For the first time, your narrative made me turn away. I think I'm breathing. I could relate to that sensation, thus it made me feel something. And I realized, I didn't just reclaim my life. I allowed folks to bring theirs to Alan. Still no job. I also never returned. When I last heard from her, she was attempting to wed into an affluent family that her father had met via golf. I wish you luck in your endeavor. Parents. They sent a family friend to intervene as a final ploy. Like some peace messenger, a man I hadn't seen since high school appeared at my door. He answered, "You've got your point. Now I understand. Perhaps it's time to return home." I didn't respond. I simply grabbed my phone, pulled out the wedding picture, the one with the champagne glass, and Alan laughing. Additionally, I'm zoomed in and placed slightly out of frame in the corner. I responded, "They didn't just crop the photo, I was clipped by them." There he stood, nothing to say. He nodded and walked away. I remained close to Sophie, but we didn't reconcile. Scars bind us together. The same form. She once traveled to Costa Rica to see me. We conversed till dawn while sipping rum on the beach. She remarked with a smile as she walked away, "I left you behind, and you've changed." This is a positive thing. She was correct. I completed a task that I had been putting off for years, a few weeks ago. I purchased a whiteboard from a nearby office supply store and scribbled a single phrase in large black characters over the top, with borders beneath. I mentioned 10 names of folks I had been attempting to win over for years. I put a column next to each name, showed me respect, took advantage of me. My name was one of the 2 names that received a check mark. Now, when people inquire as to whether I regret my actions, revealing the truth and canceling the catering, use a flamethrower to destroy every bridge. I chuckle since it wasn't relatives that I lost. It was a delusion. I wasn't loved by them. I was able to help them, and they enjoyed it. They cherished the quiet and compliance. Indeed, naturally. Each time I unlocked my wallet, they extended their hands. But then I got up. When I declined, they became strangers. Perhaps they were always. Retaliation is a fantasy for some individuals. I had a dream about peaceful mornings, coffee without fear in my belly. I have friends that text me just for fun, not because they are in need of anything. I had a dream about waking up free of the burden of being someone else's emotional trash can. I have that now, and I will never again give it up. Alan sent me his final note on my birthday. I hope you're content. You were necessary to us. I eventually said, grinning, I needed me too. That's the distinction. This concludes the narrative. Freedom, not a picture-perfect family, not a cozy reunion over pie and forgiveness. You can't call it family if you treat me like furniture, one guy replied, finally, looking his blood in the face. After then, he walked away without turning around. If you're seeking for a lesson, here it is. Call you cheap when you're spending your money if they make fun of your hardship. To cancel the catering, make fun of your work, your attire, and your heart. Book a flight after letting them experience what it's like to be hungry just once. To finally choose yourself, raise a glass and toast. An extra chapter. It was me who called off the catering for my brother's wedding. You may ask me anything. My brother told a gathering 2 months ago. I appreciate the cash, but nobody wants to see a janitor in the wedding pictures. I covered the cost of the catering. I canceled the entire order that evening. While humiliation and cold pizza were being provided, I was in Costa Rica drinking wine on a terrace. At the moment, I remained silent. I simply turned to go. I'm now responding to the inquiries that people are making. Do I feel bad about it? No. I'm sorry I was silent for so long. Not for putting a line at last. Has Alan ever shown regret? No. You win, was his final message. I didn't respond. Was he abandoned by Emma? Indeed. 3 days following the nuptials. Were you supported by your parents? They made an effort to coerce me into re-establishing the family. I physically and emotionally shut the door in their face. Do you still work as a janitor? Yes, and I'm pleased about it. I don't simply clean floors, I clean messes. What were the responses? Good. I was thanked by thousands of strangers. Some people cut out poisonous family members. A female sent a message. You authorized me to resign from my position as the family bank. No, I was referred to as uncaring by others. Claimed that I spoiled a wedding. Not for a second. Someone once told me, you'll regret it when your parents are gone. I don't. I've finished speaking. I've moved on. However, one question remains. Who do you become at the end of a lifetime of tidying up after others? I'm still trying to figure that out. And I'm all right with not knowing for the first time in my life. Story 3. My uncle gave my son a printed chart of the family's best children at his birthday celebration and said, "You're not even on it." Before I put the classified packet in front of him, everyone laughed. This occurred during my son's 10th birthday celebration a week ago. Even thinking about it makes me upset. In my parents' backyard, we were having a celebration. Just balloons, a fold-out table, some snacks, and a cake, with an excessive amount of blue frosting, nothing spectacular. Everything had been arranged by my wife and me. At last, Max felt elated. This year, he really wanted his cousins to be present, even though he dislikes large gatherings. Then Uncle Ron arrived. As usual, he arrived late, carrying a bag of chips in one hand and a rolled-up piece of paper in the other. I got the birthday guy a wonderful gift. He spoke loudly enough to make everyone turn. Max glowed. Something cool, he thought. Ron gave the paper to him. Open it now, he urged. This one is instructive. Slowly, Max unrolled it. He read aloud the title, stumbling a little. Top children in the household, ranked according on attitude, accomplishments, and behavior. I swear to God that I believed it to be a joke that would be funny. However, names, real ranks, pictures, and point scores were all included. Sarah assisted Grandma with grocery shopping. Did you receive an A in math? 15 points. In soccer, Nate scored twice. Always say thank you and please. 12 points. This month, Ava made her own bed 5 times. At the very bottom, in red, are 9 points. Max wasn't rated for being a bit of a drama queen and sobbing while, rejecting veggies, died. Run chuckled. Hey champ, you have to prove yourself to get a slot next year. Max remained still. It was like someone disconnected him since his smile vanished so quickly. The remainder of the family. They didn't even chuckle uncomfortably. In fact, my sister gave a clap. Rich, my cousin, yelled. Oh no, fair yet brutal. I turned to face Max. All he could do was look at the chart. In one hand, he held the birthday card he had made for Ron, crumpling it slowly for a brief moment. I remember Max tripping at his own party last year, face buried in cake. When Ron said, "That's one way to blow out candles," everyone stopped laughing. Max sobbed into my shirt during this time. That day, we departed early. Nobody took notice. Let's go back to the present. I quietly told Max to go inside and wait for me after removing the chart from his hands. I took the folder out of the hallway where I had left my coat. I considered bringing thick red marker to label everything. Private family financial documents, 2018-2024. Ron was still laughing when I returned to the yard. The others were going about their lives as if nothing strange had occurred. I placed the folder down on the gift table. "Heart, what's this?" Ron asked. I looked him dead in the face. "You want to rank kids for how useful they are? Cool. Let's talk about who's been supporting you all this time." Quiet. Like real, actual silence. Even my mom froze. Max peeked out the window, eyes wide, and for once he saw me standing up. Not just for him, but for every time they made us feel smaller than we are. When I dropped that folder on the table, the air changed. Uncle Ron blinked like you didn't understand. "Well, okay, what's all this?" I looked around at everyone. This is a list to my own little ranking. Only mine's, based on who's been paying, whose mortgage, who's been covering whose car repairs, and who paid for your wife's hospital bills when you forgot your insurance expired. Dead silence. Ron turned red. Not ashamed, but angry. "Come on, man," he said, forcing a chuckle. "It was just a little joke. Something to make the kids laugh." "You mean a joke at my son's expense?" I said on his birthday in front of everyone. Ron held up his hands like I was being unreasonable. Okay. Listen, it was meant to be motivational, that's all. Something to push Max a little. He's a good kid. Sure, but let's be honest, he's soft. That was it. That term gentle hit me like a blow. I chuckled. Motivational. You ranked youngsters based on phony accomplishment points. Like it's some Hunger Games for toddlers. And then you penalized him for not eating veggies and sobbing during a card game. That's inspiration to you. It's called harsh love, Ron stated. We grew up on it. Look how we turned out. I snapped. Oh, you mean bankrupt? Twice divorced and living off your nephew's generosity? I fired back. Yes. A true outstanding example. His face contorted. You're exaggerating. Today's children are overindulged. It makes sense why Max gets upset over everything. My wife, who never participates in these arguments, stood up at that point. I know when people don't like me, even when they pretend it's love, she added softly, which is why Max cries. I noticed my mother shifting uneasily on her lawn chair. Now let's just relax. Actually, I interrupted. Let's not. Let's speak about how, for years, I have been silently supporting each of you because I believed that family meant something and didn't want to make anyone feel inferior. However, my kid is being humiliated in front of everyone on his day by these ranked children. Family isn't that. Ron gave an eye roll. All of this over a piece of paper, really? No, I said. After 11 years of putting up with your bullshit, I'm doing this now. This was only the last push. I then looked at Max. He continued to see everything from the window. In our family, you never have to prove yourself. Not with trophies or gold stars, and most especially not with someone else's scoreboard, I informed him. Max's eyes, glassy yet steady, nodded. At last, my father raised his voice. Let's not make a big deal out of this. Even though Ron may have gone too far, a celebration is being held. A scene, I said again. Do you believe that making a scene is the goal here? You laughed along with your grandson as he was humiliated. You allowed it to occur. Perhaps we don't belong here at all if this is how you define family. Now, with his chest pumped as if he were ready to go, Ron got to his feet. Complete alpha mode. I was only attempting to fortify him. Someone needs to prepare him for the challenges of life. I gave a sour laugh. Yes. And who was your preparer? Since that obviously didn't work. Max approached me at that point and grasped my hand. He remained silent. He didn't have to. We were finished. I should have left at that moment, but I chose not to. Something within me. I decided I was done after silently bearing everything for years. And I wasn't going anywhere without telling everyone. Do you remember what I said? Ron's smug expression is still in front of me as I stand beside that dumb present table. Want to make children more resilient? Why don't we begin with adults first? Ron crossed his arms. Oh, please. I reached for the folder once again, opened it, and took out several pages that I had printed the previous evening. I held the sheets up like flashcards and turned to face the gathering. "This is the March property tax bill you received." I gave him a wave as I said, "Anonymously paid." I was that person. The crowd moved. A couple of gasps. "A kind family friend paid this one hospital payment for Aunt Linda's hip surgery." I was the same way. "Ron, now look pallid. And this place." I put another one on the table and added, "A record of all the times I took care of your child's school meals when the amount was inadvertently past due. Do you want me to continue?" Ron's voice rose and he yelled, "I didn't ask you to do that. You choose to." "You made that choice?" "Yes," I replied, as I believed it to be the proper course of action. However, it seems that in this family, doing the right thing entails getting kicked in the teeth. Everyone was silent now. Rich, my cousin, who is normally unable to stop talking, was also fixated on the grass. Ron made another attempt. "This is pitiful. Are you really making a soap opera out of the birthday present I gave your child?" "No," I said. "You made your twisted little rose session out of his birthday." "What?" "To feel tall again, you have to make a 10-year-old feel inferior." My mother attempted to intervene. "Let's all take a seat." "No, I lost my temper. This goes beyond today. For years, this has been developing. You people make little jokes about how sensitive Max is, how stiff I am, and how I earn a lot of money but don't use it enough on every birthday and holiday. Even if without me, half of you wouldn't be standing here with functional automobiles." My dad's side now obviously irritated. "You weren't asked to be the hero. Did you do that by yourself?" "Yes," I replied sourly. "And until I began to demand even the most basic respect in return, none of you had any issues with it." "Man," Ron slammed down his drink. "You're very conceited." "No," I said, taking a step forward. "I've finally had enough of you." He sneered. "Man, whatever. Go on the internet and cry about it. That's why you're not taken seriously." "What's funny, do you?" "You created a chart about children's contributions to the family," I said. "However, you wouldn't even make the top 10, because everyone knew it was true if we made one about adults, and who truly works hard, both financially and emotionally." With his jaw clenched and his fists clenched as if he wanted to swing, he gazed at me. But since he had nothing, he didn't. I looked at Max. His small, smashed birthday card was still in his hand. His back was straight, but his lip was quivering. I squatted down beside him. "Are you all right?" I inquired. He gave a nod. "You have my admiration," I said. "Do you hear me? Not for being superior to those who ought to have protected you today. Not for being ranked. Not for being nice." He took a deep swallow. "Are we allowed to return home?" "Yes," I said. "This is where we're done." I got to my feet, picked up the folder and tore it in two, dropped the fragments onto the grass. Turned to Ron one last time. "Don't ever come near my son again." "You're being dramatic," he muttered. I laughed, not just clear. I walked past the whole group. Not one of them tried to stop me. Not one apology, not one word. I opened the car door, let Max climb in, and as I sat down behind the wheel, I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt. I felt done free. I thought walking out of that party would be the end. It wasn't. I should have known better in my family. Silence doesn't mean peace. It means they're regrouping, plotting, figuring out how to make you the villain in your own story. The next morning, I had a dozen missed calls. Cousins, my parents, even my aunt who lives 3 states away. All the voicemails said the same thing, only with varied amounts of false concern. "You didn't have to go that far. He's your uncle. He suffered a heart attack. This is a family. Families don't degrade each other like that, right? Because publicly embarrassing a 10-year child on his birthday, totally fine. But responding to it too far. Around midday, my phone called again. This time, it was Ron's wife. I gazed at the screen for a full minute before I picked up. "Hey," she said gently. "Can we have a conversation?" Her voice was odd. No animosity. Simply exhausted. Later that day, we met in a coffee shop. She didn't appear to have slept. No cosmetics. The hair was pulled back. A big envelope was passed across the table by her. She said that he had been lying to everyone about the money. The envelope contains information about you, bank records, screenshots and text messages, even my name on a PayPal receipt. Over 6 years, more than $12,000. I transferred money under several identities for maintenance, emergencies, and school expenses. Ron received some of it personally, some through his daughter, and some through a mutual acquaintance in need of assistance. He had planned the entire event. I felt sick to my stomach. She said, "You didn't deserve what happened at that party. He is not in good physical or mental health. However, that does not justify it." She added that the ranking thing wasn't even meant for Max, and I nodded slowly while looking through the documents. I realized something was wrong when he printed a fresh version of the list without Max's name on it, even though he had produced it before and used to make jokes about it at barbecues. Although that was the first twist, there would be more to come. My mother arrived at my residence later that week. Not a warning, just knocked on the door while holding a folded letter in one hand and a Tupperware container in the other. Regarding the celebration, she replied, "I was mistaken. Almost anything." She took a seat on my couch as if she had done it 100 times. As if we were all right. As if nothing had occurred. She said, "I should have stopped, Ron. I ought to have spoken out. I just was unsure of how to respond." I didn't answer. I simply gazed at the note she was holding. "Ron sent it," she said. While in the hospital, he composed it. I spread the paper out. It was careless. Most likely written in a hurry. Perhaps I deserved it, but you embarrassed me. I'm no longer sure what's wrong with me. When no one else was around, you were the one who always arrived. Perhaps that's why I was angry with you. I apologize. Inform Max that I was mistaken. No justifications. Simply just honesty. I was surprised by it. The third curveball then appeared. Max. He remained silent in the days following the celebration. Go through books. Constructed cities out of Legos. However, I discovered a letter saying, "I'm glad you didn't laugh with them," on his pillow one evening. I believed that I was flawed, but perhaps they are simply cruel. "I appreciate you going with me." I read it 3 times. I sobbed because I had believed for years that I had to maintain harmony for his benefit. He didn't require tranquility. He required the truth. It wasn't over, though. We received an invitation to a BBQ, another family gathering, that weekend. "Just stop by," my mother urged. "I swear there won't be any drama." I had no desire to go. Neither did my wife, however, Max. It was his desire to see his cousins. So we left. Rich was there, of course, but Ron wasn't. The others, who chuckled at the chart, were also amused. They first shunned us, whispered, nodded, and made a courteous phony grin. Then I was surrounded near the grill by Rich. He chewed a toothpick and said, "Hey, I wanted to let you know that you overreacted." I arched an eyebrow. "Do you find it amusing to make fun of my child?" "Dude, it was a joke," he said. "You made it into a legal matter." I didn't shout. I refrained from using profanity. I just asked him whether it was his child while maintaining eye contact. Additionally, a written list of his shortcomings was given to him by someone. "Would you still be giggling?" He didn't respond. Rather, he turned to go. Here's the last twist, though. A cousin I hardly ever talked to messaged me after the party, claiming that Ron used to treat her disrespectfully and that her daughter had been dealing with anxiety for years. "Make fun of her troll. Make her tougher. After your son's birthday," she wrote, "I cried all the way home. It was because someone finally said anything, not because of what Ron did." She replied, "I wish my dad had done that for me," as she watched Max go off with you. For the first time I realized anything, so I gazed at the message for a long time. I called them out as I was leaving. Max wasn't the only one. It was dedicated to all children who have ever been told they are too quiet, too sensitive, too much, or not enough. And it was for every adult who still feels they need to earn love that day because they hear those whispers in their brain. I did more than simply confront my family. I stood up for all the versions of myself that had no one to support them. 3 months have passed since that day. It has been 3 months since I placed that black private packet on the table. It still feels unreal at times since I left the individuals who had been stealing from me for years under the guise of family when I left that party with my son's hand in mine. I initially thought someone would drag me back in. Like usual, the guilt would seep in. I used to hear my mother's voice in my brain while I was laying in bed late at night. "You're going overboard. Your family is us." However, it never struck in the same manner again, because Max had witnessed everything this time. He had endured the disgrace, The room was quiet. The time when those who were meant to care for him the most mocked his suffering. More significantly, he witnessed me saying enough. Both he and I were altered by it. Being the dependable one was something I used to take pride in. It's the person who consistently shows up, pays the bills, makes things go smoothly, and never raises a fuss. However, I now see that being the trustworthy one is a trap when the only person contributing is you. And it doesn't matter how much it costs. I thought Max would have questions after the fallout, but he didn't. A week after the cookout, I discovered him at the kitchen table one evening constructing something out of Legos. He was seated across from me. "Are you doing all right?" I inquired. He gave a shrug. "Yes." "Now it's quieter." "That's good." I gave a nod. "Are you missing them?" After a little delay, he shook his head. "Not at all. When people genuinely like me, I like it." Babe's words caused life to move on in unexpected ways. Ron's wife filed for separation from him around 6 weeks after our altercation, though she did not leave him immediately. She told me over the phone that she could no longer pretend that she had been covering for him and defending him for too long, and that what he had done to Max had finally caused her to lose it. "You know that kid of yours?" she asked. "He is courageous. I'm hoping mine is half as good." It wasn't warmly received by Ron. He attempted to twirl it. She told the family that she left him because I had forced her to do so since she was unstable all the time. However, nobody really purchased it. For years, he had crossed lines in front of too many people. The distinction was that they could no longer act as though they hadn't. Max began to flourish. He began drawing comic books, joined a coding club, and even compiled a list of the top 5 individuals who genuinely like me. I was the top. The other names: his instructor, his mother, himself, and Claire, our neighbor. I cried at the last one. I made new connections with folks I hadn't seen in a long time. I cut ties with friends since I was constantly preoccupied with my family. We received an invitation from one of them, Sam, to spend a weekend at the lake. Just laughter, no drama, no guilt. Board games. Marshmallows that have burned. On the drive home, Max told me, "Is that something we can do annually?" "Yes, we can. Yes, we will." I began going to therapy with my wife. Not because we were having difficulties, but rather because we wanted to learn how to improve things, end the cycle, and educate our child that love is given freely rather than demanded. We also began discussing the possibility of attempting to conceive another kid. It's funny how closing the wrong doors may lead to new opportunities in life. The remainder of the family fell apart. Not my fault. I merely switch on the lights, but they'll tell you it was. There were already several cracks in them. I just stopped using adhesive to fill them. A few cousins silently extended their hands. "I wish I had the courage to do what you did," one of them remarked. "You don't need guts," I told her. "All you have to do is quit lying to yourself about your pain." Ron and I haven't spoken since. Or Rich. Or half of those who opted to chuckle while seeing a youngster being humiliated. And what do you know? I haven't heard a better sound in years than that quiet. 2 weeks ago was the most recent surprise. A card arrived in the mail. No address for return. There was a picture of Max during his birthday celebration inside. Before the meltdown, that is. He was grinning broadly as he blew out the candles. I first didn't identify the handwriting on the back of the picture. "He was worthy of better. I apologize." That was it. No explanation, no signature. But I was aware of who it was. And that's the problem with defending yourself when you do. It trembles. The falsehoods are shaken loose. Individuals have been holding on. It makes everyone around you make a decision about their true selves. Some depart, some people remain, some just go while others apologize, silently embarrassed, as well as you go on. I'm not the trustworthy one for the first time in my life. I am who I am. A dad, a husband, a man who at last understands his boundaries and where everyone else starts. Last night, Max asked me if we would still be spending the holidays with Grandma. Perhaps, I responded. However, only if we so choose. Not because it seems necessary to us. He grinned. So let's remain at home. We can watch awful movies and cook pancakes. I think that sounds great. A family tree is not necessary for us if there are decaying roots. We'll construct a new structure. The earth is pure this time.